The inciting incident. At the luxury shopping mall with his elegant fiancée, the ruthless mafia boss and millionaire CEO turns pale after seeing his ex-wife with triplets. He was a shadow king, a man who ruled the city's underworld and its boardrooms with cold, lethal precision. She was the only heart he ever allowed himself to keep, until he realized her love was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. The conflict. So, he burned the bridge between them to protect his empire, choosing blood and power over her. 5 years of brutal expansion, 5 years of a cold throne, until he sees her among the designer storefronts. Beside her stand 3 identical boys, their obsidian eyes reflecting his own fierce gaze. His unsuspecting fiancée clings to his arm, laughing, while his meticulously built future collides head-on with the legacy he abandoned. The theme. The man who never flinched in the face of death is finally about to break. This is the story of the Mafia king who sacrificed his soul for a crown and the woman who raised his heirs in the strength of silence. Welcome to a legacy that couldn't be buried. It only grew. Call to action. Hey everyone. I'm back with a gripping Afro-Korean tale of power, betrayal, and a reunion that changes everything. Before we uncover the CEO's darkest secret, hit that like button if you believe some bonds are stronger than any criminal empire. I see you all tuning in. Drop a comment with your city so our global community can connect. If you're new here, subscribe and ring the bell. You won't want to miss how this mafia boss handles the one variable he never saw coming. Setting the scene. All right, let's step into the world of Dae's song. The marble floors of the Grand Galleria shone like a frozen lake under the weight of 1,000 chandeliers. Dae-Hyun Dae's song walked through the crowd like a god among mortals, establishing the protagonist. In this world, he practically was. He didn't just shop here. His shell companies owned the very air the shoppers breathed. He lived within an invisible fortress of bodyguards and billion-dollar contracts, a bubble of privilege that kept the common world at bay. At 34, Dae had mastered the art of fear. His organization had revolutionized the city's power structure, leaving rivals trembling and the police looking the other way. The memory hit Dae like a punch to the stomach, even though it happened 5 years ago. Back then, his world was full of smoke and shadows. He stood in their small apartment, the only place where he felt like a normal man instead of a monster. Amara was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes wide and full of a love he didn't think he deserved. "I have to go, Amara," Dae had said. His voice was as cold as a winter morning. He was wearing his first expensive suit, the one he bought with money earned from a job that left blood on his hands. "Is it the business again?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but it shook. "You promised we would find a way out. You said we could go somewhere far away, where nobody knows your name." Dae looked away because he couldn't face the truth in her eyes. "There is no a way for someone like me. The syndicate elders are watching. If I stay with you, they will see you as a target. They will use you to get to me." That was the first lie he told himself. He told himself he was leaving to keep her safe. He told himself that by breaking her heart, he was saving her life. But deep down, a darker part of him wanted the power. He wanted to see men bow when he entered a room. He wanted to be the king of the city, and a king could not have a queen who made him feel weak. "I am choosing the family," Dae said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. "Our marriage was a secret, and it has to stay that way. If I see you again, I won't recognize you. You need to disappear, Amara. For your own good." Amara didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just stood up, her deep brown skin glowing under the dim light, and looked at him with a strength that made him feel small. "You aren't protecting me, Dae. You are protecting your throne. You are choosing a cage of gold over a life of love." He had walked out then, not even looking back as she started to cry. He spent the next 5 years telling himself he did the right thing. He watched his bank account grow and his enemies fall. He convinced himself that Amara was probably living a quiet, boring life somewhere else, forgetting the man who broke her soul. He had optimized his life for success. He had calculated every move like a game of chess. But as he stood in the middle of the luxury mall, looking at the three little boys who had his eyes, Dex realized his math was all wrong. He had left her to build an empire, but looking at the family he had abandoned, he realized he had spent 5 years winning a war only to lose everything that actually mattered. The penthouse was too quiet. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city lights of Seoul, but to Dex, the glowing buildings looked like cold, distant stars. He stood by the glass, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He was still wearing the dark navy suit from the mall, but it felt like a lead weight pressing against his skin. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those three boys. He saw the way they stood together, three little versions of himself, looking at him with questions he wasn't ready to answer. "Are you going to say something? Or should I just guess?" Claire's voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. Dex turned around. Claire was sitting on a white velvet chair, her long ponytail still perfectly neat. She hadn't even taken off her elegant black dress. She looked like a queen, but her eyes were full of a cold, biting anger. She didn't look worried about his health. She looked worried about her reputation. "It was just a shock, Claire," Dex said. He tried to make his voice sound steady, the way a mafia boss should sound. "Seeing someone from so long ago caught me off guard." "A shock?" Claire laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You turned as white as a sheet, Dex. You almost stopped breathing. And those children, anyone with eyes could see they look exactly like you. People were staring. Do you know what that does to our brand? We are supposed to be the perfect power couple. We are about to merge two of the biggest names in the country." Dex looked at her and felt a strange hollowness in his chest. "They are just kids, Claire. They are stains, Dex," she snapped, standing up. She walked toward him, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. "They are mistakes from a past you said was dead. If the newspapers get a hold of this, it will look messy. It looks weak. We have a wedding to plan, and I won't have it ruined by some woman and her three little baggage items." Dex stared at his fiancée. For 5 years, he had worked to surround himself with people like Claire, people who cared about power, money, and the brand. He had thought this was what he wanted. He thought a life without messy emotions was the ultimate goal. But hearing her call his own blood stains made his stomach turn. Claire reached out and touched his arm, her grip firm. "I don't care who she is. I don't care who they are. You need to handle it. Make them go away. Pay her, threaten her, do whatever your family does. Just make sure they never show their faces in public again. We have an empire to run, Dex. Don't let a few ghosts from your past pull you down." Dex didn't pull his arm away, but he didn't lean in either. He looked back at the city. He had spent his whole life building a fortress to keep himself safe and powerful. But as he listened to Claire talk about his children like they were trash to be thrown away, he realized his perfect life was actually a very expensive, very lonely cage. The mafia boss was supposed to be the one in control, but for the first time, he felt like he was losing the lead in his own game. Dex didn't sleep that night. He sat in his leather office chair, watching the sun slowly climb over the jagged skyline of the city. As soon as the clock struck 8, he called Min-ho, his most trusted security chief. Dex didn't need to explain much. He just gave the name, Amara Vance. He wanted to know everything she had done since the night he walked out of her life. By noon, a thick blue folder sat on his desk. Dex hesitated before opening it. He was a man who handled dangerous secrets for a living, but his hands felt heavy as he flipped the first page. He expected to see that she had struggled. He expected to find records of her leaving the country or perhaps working 3 jobs just to survive. After all, he had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a broken heart. Instead, the report told a completely different story. Amara had never left Korea. While Dex was busy fighting for his life in the syndicate and building his multi-billion-dollar company, Amara had been building her own world. She had finished her degree while pregnant. She had started a small tech firm that grew into a powerhouse. She was respected, successful, and completely independent. Most shockingly, Dex looked through the financial section twice to be sure. She had never asked for a single cent. She hadn't sued him for child support. She hadn't tried to sell her story to the newspapers or use his famous name to get ahead. For 5 years, she had lived right under his nose, raising 3 boys in the same city where his face was on every billboard. Yet she had remained invisible to him. Dex leaned back, the paper crinkling in his grip. The report included a photo of her office. She looked just like she did at the mall, calm and strong. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a woman who had taken the pieces of her broken life and turned them into armor. He realized then that Amara hadn't just survived his abandonment. She had conquered it. She had raised his legacy in a world of silence, keeping his sons away from the blood and the greed of his mafia life. Dex felt a sharp pang of shame. He had spent years telling himself he was the powerful one, the one who made all the big moves. But Amara was the one with real power. She had done the impossible. She had built a kingdom of her own without ever needing a king. The report made one thing very clear. Amara Vance didn't want his money, and she certainly didn't seem to want him. For a man who was used to buying whatever he desired, Dex felt a terrifying sense of loss. He had the world at his feet, but the only people who truly belonged to him were living a life that he wasn't even invited to see. Dex didn't wait for an invitation. He used his resources to find out exactly where Amara would be. 2 days after the first shock, he found her back at a quiet corner of the mall, sitting in a small cafe while the triplets played in a nearby indoor play area. He watched them for a moment from behind a glass wall. They were laughing, their small faces bright with joy. He saw himself in the way Dae-Hyun moved, and his own father's smile in Dae-Hyun. When he stepped into the cafe, the air seemed to grow heavy. Amara didn't look up until he was standing right in front of her table. She was sipping tea, looking as calm as the deep ocean. She didn't look afraid of the man who ruled the city's shadows. "You shouldn't be here, Dex," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made his heart sink. "I saw the report, Amara," Dex replied, sitting down across from her without being asked. "I know you did this all on your own. I know you never asked for help. But those boys, they are my sons. I have a right to know them." Amara finally looked at him. Her deep brown eyes weren't filled with anger. Instead, they were filled with a cold, hard truth that hurt more than any weapon. She set her cup down slowly, her hands perfectly steady. "Rights?" she whispered, leaning forward. "You talk about rights like this is a business deal, like you can just sign a paper and become a father after 5 years of silence." "I did it to keep you safe," Dex argued, using the same old lie he had told himself for years. "The syndicate, the wars, I couldn't have you in that world." Amara shook her head. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "No, Dex, you didn't leave to save me. You left because you loved the power more than you loved us. You wanted to be the great Dex Song, the man who owns the city. You wanted a throne, and you knew a family would make you feel human. And in your world, being human is a weakness." Dex opened his mouth to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He looked out at the boys. One of them, Dae-Hyun, looked over and waved at his mother. Dex felt a sharp pull in his chest, a feeling of belonging that he had thrown away long ago. "I want to make it up to you," Dex said, his voice cracking. "I can give them everything. The best schools, the best life. I have billions, Amara." Amara stood up and slung her designer bag over her shoulder. She looked down at him, and for the first time, he saw the silent resilience that had carried her through 5 years of solitude. "They already have everything they need," she said firmly. "They have a mother who stayed. They have a life built on truth, not blood and secrets. You made your choice 5 years ago, Dex. You gave up the right to be a father the night you chose your empire. Don't come back. She walked away toward the play area, and Dex sat alone at the table. He was the most powerful man in the city, but as he watched her walk away with his legacy, he had never felt more powerless. Amara had walked away, but the boys were still in the play area. Dex stayed in his seat, his eyes locked on them. He felt like he was watching a movie of a life he wasn't allowed to live. Suddenly, the youngest of the three, Dae-Hyun, came running out of the play zone. He had tripped over his own feet and landed right near Dex's table. Dex reacted before he could think. He stood up and reached out, catching the boy before he hit the hard marble floor. Dae-Hyun was small but solid, and for a second, Dex felt the warmth of his son's skin against his hands. It was a feeling more powerful than any gold or business deal he had ever made. The little boy didn't cry. Instead, he stood up and brushed off his white shirt. He looked up at Dex with wide, dark eyes. He didn't look away or act shy. He stared at Dex with a look that was so sharp and smart it made Dex feel like he was being scanned by a computer. "Are you okay, little man?" Dex asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. It was thick and shaky, not the voice of a mafia boss. Dae-Hyun didn't answer right away. He tilted his head to the side, studying Dex's face. "You look like a ghost," the boy said suddenly. His voice was high but very clear. "Your face is the color of the moon. Are you sick?" Dex was shocked. He had spent his whole life making sure nobody could read his face. He had trained himself to be a stone wall so his enemies wouldn't see his fear. But this 4-year-old child had looked at him for 5 seconds and seen exactly how he felt. "I'm not sick," Dex whispered, kneeling down so he was at the boy's level. "I'm just surprised to see you." "Do you know my mommy?" Dae-Hyun asked. He reached out and touched the sleeve of Dex's expensive navy suit. "You wear the same clothes as the men in the movies. The ones who are always sad." Dex felt a lump in his throat. He realized Amara was right. These boys weren't just stains or miniature versions of him. They were brilliant. They were observant. They could see the sadness he tried to hide under his money and his power. Dae-Hyun wasn't just a child. He was a person who could see right through Dex's armor. "Dae-Hyun, come here." Amara's voice called out. She had turned around and seen them. She moved quickly, her face full of worry. She pulled the boy away and tucked him behind her legs, looking at Dex like he was a dangerous animal. Dex stood up slowly. He didn't try to follow them this time. He just watched as Dae-Hyun looked back over his shoulder one last time. The boy gave a small, curious wave before disappearing into the crowd with his mother and brothers. Dex stood alone in the mall, the silence of the luxury shops ringing in his ears. He realized that his sons were the smartest people he had ever met, and he was the biggest fool for ever thinking he could live without them. The gold and marble of Dex's office felt like a tomb. He sat behind his heavy desk, but he wasn't alone. 3 old men sat on the leather chairs across from him. These were the syndicate elders. They were the ones who had given Dex his power, but they were also the ones who could take it away. They didn't care about money as much as they cared about the family. "We saw the photos from the mall, Dae-Hyun," the oldest man said. His voice was like dry leaves scraping on a sidewalk. He didn't use Dex's modern nickname. He used the name Dex had been born with. "You have a secret that makes you look weak to our enemies." Dex felt his jaw tighten. He didn't move a muscle, but his heart was racing. "They are just children. They are not part of this business." The elder leaned forward, his eyes cold and sharp. "In our world, nothing is separate. These boys and this woman are a distraction. They are a target that our rivals will use to destroy us. You are the head of this empire. You cannot have a heart that beats for anyone but the syndicate." Dex looked at the men who had taught him how to be a wolf. For 5 years he had followed their rules. He had thought their way was the only way to be strong. But now, all he could think about was Taeyong's small hand touching his sleeve, and Amara's quiet strength. "What are you saying?" Dex asked, his voice a low growl. "The distraction must be eliminated." The elder replied calmly, as if he were talking about a business deal. "You need to clean up your past. Send them away where they can never be found, or we will handle it for you. You have 24 hours to choose. Choose the throne, or choose the ghost of a family you already abandoned." The elders stood up and walked out, leaving Dex in the silence. He looked at the folder on his desk, then out at the city he supposedly owned. He realized the terrifying truth. As long as he was the mafia boss, his sons would never be safe. The world he had worked 5 years to build was not a fortress. It was a giant target painted on the backs of the people he loved. Dex stood up and walked to the window. To save his sons, he couldn't just pay someone off or hide. He had to tear down the very wall he had built. He had to destroy the syndicate from the inside out. He had to give up his crown, his money, and his reputation. It was the hardest math he had ever done. But for the first time in his life, the answer was simple. He would rather be a father with nothing than a king who had to kill his own heart to keep a seat. Dex walked back into the penthouse. The air felt thin and cold, like the high mountains. Claire was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by wedding magazines and expensive fabric samples. She looked up at him, her face full of plans for a future that Dex no longer wanted. "I've decided on the flowers, Dex," she said, not noticing the storm in his eyes. "White lilies. They represent purity and power. It will look perfect for the cameras." "There isn't going to be a wedding, Claire," Dex said. His voice didn't shake. It was the calmest he had felt in years. Claire stopped mid-sentence. The magazine slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. "What did you just say?" "I'm done," Dex said, stepping toward her. "I'm done with the brand, the lies, and this fake life. You don't love me, Claire. You love the CEO of a billion-dollar company and the mafia boss who can protect your interests. But that man is gone." Claire's face twisted into a mask of rage. "You are throwing away everything. For what? For a woman who doesn't even want you and 3 children who are a liability. If you walk away from me, you walk away from my father's support. You will be alone." "I've been alone for 5 years," Dex replied quietly. "I'm just finally admitting it." He didn't wait for her to scream or cry. He turned his back on the luxury and the gold and drove straight to the syndicate's headquarters. He didn't bring his bodyguards. He didn't bring a weapon. He walked into the dark boardroom where the elders sat waiting for his answer. Dex took the heavy gold ring from his finger, the symbol of his rank as the boss, and threw it onto the table. It bounced and rolled before stopping in front of the head elder. "I'm out," Dex stated. "I'm resigning as CEO and I'm leaving the family. Take the money. Take the buildings. Take the name." The room went silent. The elders looked at each other, their eyes turning dark and dangerous. "You know the rules, Dae-Hyun," one whispered. "Nobody just leaves. If you are not with us, you are a threat. A hostile takeover will start the moment you walk out that door. We will take everything you built, and we will hunt you down." "Then start hunting," Dex said, his eyes burning. "But know this. If any of you go near Amara or my sons, I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let you touch them. You can have the throne. It's just a chair in an empty room." As he walked out, he felt the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. He was losing his billions and his power, but he felt more like a man than he ever had. He realized that power without a legacy, without love and a family to leave it to, was just a very expensive grave. He was finally free, but he knew the real war to protect his boys was just beginning. Dex didn't go to a hotel or his penthouse. He moved into a small, dusty apartment in a part of the city where the neon lights didn't shine. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't sleeping on silk sheets. He spent his nights sitting at a cracked wooden table, surrounded by old laptops and paper maps. He was no longer the king of the city, but he was still a master of shadows. He knew the syndicate elders wouldn't let him leave easily. They were already sending out men to find his weaknesses. But Dex knew their secrets better than they knew their own. For years, he had been the one who organized their files and handled their dirty deals. Now he used those skills like a surgeon's knife. Working in the dark, Dex began to dismantle his rivals. He didn't use guns or bombs. Instead, he leaked digital files to the police about the elders' illegal bank accounts. He sent anonymous tips to the government about the secret warehouses where they hid their stolen goods. One by one, the people who threatened his family found themselves facing judges and handcuffs. Every morning, he would drive a beat-up car to a spot near the boys' school. He stayed hidden behind tinted windows, watching as Amara dropped them off. He watched them run into the building with their backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. He saw the way Amara looked around, her eyes cautious, as if she could feel him nearby. He wanted to run to her to tell her they were almost safe, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. For the first time in his life, Dex was using his Mafia skills for someone other than himself. In the past, he had used fear to grow his bank account. Now, he used his knowledge to build an invisible wall around the 3 boys and the woman he had hurt. He wasn't looking for a profit. He was looking for peace. By the end of the week, the syndicate was falling apart. The hostile takeover they had planned against Dex had turned into a desperate scramble to stay out of jail. Dex watched the news on a small, flickering TV in his room. The family business was burning down, and he was the one who had lit the match. He looked at a photo of Taemin, Tae-Hee, and Taeyong that he had taken from a distance. They were smiling. They didn't know that their father was fighting a war in the shadows to make sure no monster ever knocked on their door. Dex felt a strange kind of tired happiness. He was losing his reputation as a feared boss, but he was becoming something much more important. He was becoming a protector. He was finally cleaning the blood off his legacy so that his sons would never have to carry his sins. The war was over. The syndicate was gone, and the dark world Dex once ruled had crumbled into dust. He didn't feel like a boss anymore. He felt like a man who had finally found his way home after being lost in a storm. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't wearing a designer suit or a cold, hard mask. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. There were no bodyguards behind him and no expensive watches on his wrist. He walked into the green park where the sun was warm on the grass. He saw Amara sitting on a wooden bench, watching the boys play near a big oak tree. She saw him coming from a long way off. She didn't stand up to run, and she didn't look for a way to hide. She just watched him, her eyes soft as she realized the man walking toward her wasn't the Mafia king. He was just Dex. Dex stopped a few feet away from the bench. He looked at the boys, Taemin, Tae-Hee, and Taeyong, who were busy racing each other across the field. They looked so happy and so free. "It's safe now, Amara," Dex said quietly. "The syndicate is gone. Nobody is coming for them. Nobody is coming for you." Amara stood up slowly. She looked at his simple clothes and his tired, honest face. "You really did it," she whispered. "You threw away the empire." "It was just a pile of gold and secrets," Dex said with a shrug. "It didn't mean anything. This is the only thing that matters." The boys noticed him then. Taeyong, the one who had called him a ghost, stopped running and looked over. He nudged his brothers, and the 3 of them walked over to the adults. They stood in a row, looking up at Dex with those sharp, curious eyes that mirrored his own. "Are you the ghost man again?" Taeyong asked, tilting his head. "You don't look like a ghost today. You look real." Dex knelt down on the grass so he was eye to level with his sons. He felt a giant lump in his throat, and for the first time in his life he didn't try to swallow it back. He let his eyes get misty. He reached out, and this time he didn't just touch a sleeve. He placed his hands on their small shoulders. "I'm not a ghost," Dex said, his voice thick with love. "My name is Dex, and I'm your dad." The triplets looked at each other and then back at him. They didn't run away. Instead, Tae-Hee reached out and gave him a small, shy hug. Soon, all three boys were leaning against him, and Dex pulled them close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and grass. He looked up at Amara, and she gave him a small, nodding smile. It wasn't a full "I forgive you" yet, but it was a beginning. Dex realized then that his life used to be about math and business deals. He thought he could calculate everything. But as he held his sons in his arms, he knew that being a father was the only thing his old life could never predict, yet it was the only thing that finally made sense. His long journey was over. He was finally home.